Welcome to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. We're tackling miscommunication with the power of understanding. We're growing our mastery of the foundation of teamwork and of all relationships. And so I want to ask you to help me spread the word about stronger, more effective communication by inviting some friends to listen along with you. Then discuss what you've learned and give me your feedback. What would you like to hear from us in future episodes so we can make this podcast even more effective? Thanks for joining me. Let's jump in. And this week we celebrate 1 year of weekly episodes. This is episode 52. So we're going to celebrate our 1 year anniversary of weekly episodes by talking about a topic that's really dear to my heart. And that is that the voices I listen to really matter. And I've really been zeroing in on this recently, both on my own account and also with some clients. Because we listen to so many voices every day, don't we? We're surrounded by voices, we're surrounded by communication, and the choices we make in those areas really make a difference to our well-being and to the mastery that we have for our own communication. So let's talk a little bit about the voices for a moment. There's these outside voices. And if I start off with the kind of what I call one-way communication, we're constantly bombarded from the media and then from social media, as well as from advertising, with these one-way voices telling us what we should think and what we should do and what's happening and where the world is at and what other people say, and all of these one-way voices. You can write an angry comment in the comments, I guess, but you don't get to interact in a two-way street with those kinds of one-way voices, but they're very loud, external, outside voices that we listen to far more than we realize. If you look on your phone at the screen time statistics, you'll be shocked at how much time you spend, unless you're aware of this, how much time you spend simply scrolling or consuming output from other people that's aimed at you, and in the end it sinks into your consciousness and your mindset and affects your communication. But then there are also two-way communication externally. We all have supervisors or bosses that we work with who communicate with us and we with them. We have colleagues that we work with that we're communicating with one another consistently, I trust. Many of us have subordinates, people that we're overseeing or mentoring or supporting, who we need to communicate with them and we need them to communicate with us. All of these are outside voices in the workspace. And then outside of work, we have two-way communication with our friends, and then more close to home with family. And all of those two-way communications have the potential to bring dis-ease, if I might call it that, into our communication. There are so many factors that influence our communication in a negative way. I talk about the epidemic of distraction in today's society. So many things demanding our attention that we can't focus on any one thing. Our attention spans are reducing to mere minutes or even seconds in the way that we can focus on things. But there's also what you might call a pandemic of certainty, and it's a divisive certainty. So I'm convinced that I and all the people who agree with me are completely right, and the people who disagree with us are completely wrong and should be cancelled or rejected or called out. And we've lost the ability, or we're losing the ability, to have discussion and to have disagreement without disconnection. And then there's also a third dis-ease in our communication, and that's what I might call the cancer of comparison, where I measure myself against measures from other people, or measures from the social media world, or measures from what I see in the movies or on TV. I'm comparing myself to unrealistic measures that are not the truth about anybody. Anything you see on social media has been airbrushed or filtered so that it looks better than it really is. And so the cancer of comparison is causing us very often to draw back from wanting to have real communication and real relationships. And those those diseases, if I could twist the word in that way, mostly come from the one-way communications that I talked about: the media, the news, social media, advertising, those kind of areas. But when we come closer in, when we get into two-way communication, whether in the workplace with bosses, colleagues, or those that we're supervising, or then into our friend groups, into the community, and into our families, into our home life, the potential for misunderstanding to grow increases the closer the relationship, because we're communicating more significantly and more intentionally, but also more consistently. And then the more communication there is, the more room there is for misunderstanding to grow. And when misunderstanding grows, then distress increases with it. And the communication IQ tool that we talk about so often on this podcast gives us the understanding. It teaches us that we all have 7 distinct communication styles. Each one of us has our own profile of those 7 styles. So your preferred communication style may be a style that I'm more likely to disregard or overlook because it's lower in my profile. That means that we will miscommunicate unless you and I both learn to adapt and understand at a deeper level all 7 of those communication styles. So let me give you an example from my own experience, and we'll anonymize it to protect the guilty. But maybe we've got a leader in a business who is high in the influencer and shaper languages. That's quite common in the business world. People who are very strong at being able to see strategy, but also to be enthusiastic and inclusive and intuitive in order to apply that strategy to the widest range of people. So this is the main leader of a business, and they're high in those 2 languages. But one of their leadership team members is maybe very high in the mover and contemplator languages. It's important that all languages be represented in a leadership team in order that we don't miss out on aspects of communication that may be weak for others in the team. But having a high mover and contemplator in a team leadership is a recipe for conflict if we don't understand. It's a recipe for internal conflict for that team member, because the mover language and the contemplator language can both be very strong, but in opposite directions or with opposite goals. The mover wants to improve and innovate and make things better, to raise the standard, if you like. Whereas the contemplator wants to dig deep and find out things and be philosophical and contemplative, so that they can discover stuff that others would miss. And so there's an internal conflict with those 2 languages. So a person is already living with internal conflict, and then both of those languages are not going to sit happily alongside the influencer shaper primary leader, who's got a goal and a strategy but has steps towards the goal. They may not produce results overnight. They're also intuitive and inclusive, so they want to draw everybody in, when the contemplator very often wants to have personal space to think more deeply. You see how the potential for conflict can really lead to miscommunication and also to distress. When there is distress, then that needs to be addressed, because it's draining the effectiveness of our communication. So once we understand how the 7 styles work, we can learn to leverage the strengths of each style and the passions of each style to be beneficial to the whole team. There may be times where my mover desire to change things to make them better needs to take one step back to allow the strategy of the shaper to have a little longer to see if it will work, because they've worked out the steps to get to a specific goal. Or my desire as a high contemplator to be given personal space, and I'm not interested in engaging right now because I'm thinking about something else. I may need to put that aside temporarily for the sake of the team and the sake of the issue at hand, where what we need to do is to bring the team together and encourage them and be enthusiastic about the work that we're doing together toward the goal that the main leaders identified. So when we understand, we can avoid distress. When we don't understand, we will increase distress. And distress in any language hinders teamwork. Distress in any language can really disrupt our communication. Let me give you a second example, and this is both in the same language. There's a couple that I know who are both very high in that mover language we just talked about. They have a very high overall intensity as well, so their drive and energy to communicate is very high. Their tenacity in communication is high, but they haven't yet learned the filter question and the need from others and the driving passion along with the key strength for their mover strong language. And so they're both in distress because they've unwittingly been draining each other for months. And because they don't understand that they need to answer that filter question and meet the need and validate the strengths and encourage the passion, they're demanding change from each other whilst also simultaneously really being hard on themselves for getting into this situation. And so as I stepped into that situation as a communication coach, I had to help them and teach them, coach them to turn their distress flares, which for the mover language are to attack and demand, and then if necessary, attack again, to turn those distress flares into a request for help from the other, to define what it was that was causing them to want to attack the other. Because the more they attacked each other, the worse they made it, because they were draining the other's tank. And so they would demand from each other. The demands would not be met because they were trying to change the other without having the other's cooperation. All of those things. Once we started to look at some of the key issues behind those distress flares, then we were able to reach a measure of resolution. So distress always hinders communication, and distress can be avoided when we grow our understanding of all 7 languages. So the voices I'm listening to and knowing which voices I'm listening to are very important, especially in the closer outside relationships that you and I engage in. So if my supervisor and I are very different in our wiring, we need to learn to understand each other, to welcome what the other brings. We both will grow when we can do that. But we also have the potential to undermine each other unintentionally with distress flares if we don't take that step of understanding. So let me give you some practical steps for growing communication with those outside two-way voices. The first would be to learn all you can about all 7 communication languages so that you can become multilingual, even in a language that maybe doesn't come easily to you. You'll find you can raise your score in some of your lower languages simply by studying how they operate in other people. Number 2, pick one outside voice that would really be beneficial to work on. Maybe it's a particular employee that you manage. Maybe it's a particular colleague that you don't get along well with yet. Or maybe it's your spouse or a family member that you struggle to communicate with effectively. Pick one voice to work on first, and then use communication forensics, which we've talked about in previous episodes, so that you can find the diagnoses of why are things difficult between us. What is it that's causing that challenge? Is it cross talks where we're having to cross through different languages to understand each other? Is it maybe communication indicators where different factors besides the 7 languages are adding to the distress we're causing? Maybe we need to work through expressing my languages so that you understand where I'm coming from, and then you work through expressing your languages so I understand where you're coming from. All of these tools are available to anybody who's interested in improving a specific relationship, and they're very valuable. They create proven results in improving communication. So pick one outside voice to work on. There's a communication workout available through my website if you're interested in doing that for yourself with one particular relationship. It's about a 6-week program that you can work through, self-paced, and that will help you to do this with one specific relationship. Then, of course, you can repeat it with another. Third practical step is to create more space in your capacity for genuine relationships. And when I say genuine relationships, I mean the kind of relationships that involve eye contact, that involve hearing tone of voice in the room, in the moment, where you're reducing the weight of the one-way external voices for the sake of the real relationships, the genuine relationships that are where the communication really matters. So for most of us, we've got too much one-way communication happening, and it's draining our capacity to have two-way communication. So some of the things that I've chosen to do with my life, and I've coached others to do as well, you can use screen time limits for things like news apps and social media, especially on your phone, because your phone is with you all the time. It may be that you have a tablet or a desktop somewhere as well, or a laptop. You may want to still leave those facilities in place at a place that you don't go to all the time. But the ones that you use all the time, reduce your exposure to some of those drains, those one-way drains on communication. Maybe take some apps off your phone so that you're reducing your options for distraction. Another thing I've done is to turn off notifications for the non-urgent apps on my phone, such as email. So you don't have that little red dot that's speaking to you with a large number in it of all the emails you haven't read. Just schedule times in your day that work for you to deal with email so that it doesn't become a constant distraction. There are all kinds of other methods that you can use. I recommend the getting things done strategy that is very well known in the business world today. That works for a lot of people. And so studying what getting things done can do for you would really be valuable if that's an issue for you. So unfollow unhelpful voices. Suppose you've got somebody on your social media that every time you watch their feed, it just brings you down, or maybe it distracts you from something that's really important to you. Well, unfollow them. You don't have to unfriend them. They don't need to know you're not following them anymore, but just reduce the exposure. Those kinds of steps can really help to create more space for genuine relationships. And then the fourth practical step for outside voices would be to recognize the voices that are most beneficial to you. Maybe you've got a boss who understands your primary languages and therefore brings out the best in you. Maybe you've got a spouse who can adapt to your needs from others, knowing your language profile, and can feed that growth in communication skill by enabling you to operate at a better level or a more effective level. So invest time and energy into those valuable people, those beneficial people. Learn how to be equally beneficial to them, because that again will increase your multilingual capacity. You're enjoying the benefit of their understanding of you, and you're giving them the honor of understanding them. So that's 4 practical steps you can take with outside voices to increase your communication mastery by choosing which voices you listen to. Because like we said at the head of the program, the voices I listen to really matter. And that brings me to a vital final point. There are also voices inside you. It's not just external for communication. The person you communicate with the most is yourself. And it's important that you look at that as well. Because we speak all 7 languages daily, or at least multiple times a week if you've got one very low language, but you still speak it. Even your lowest language, you will speak 3, 4, 5 times a week at least, because it's essential to the rounded communication that we're all wired for. So another significant area that I help my clients with is that whole area that I call the team meeting inside your head. Because you've got 7 voices, you're not crazy, there are still 7 voices inside your head. For most of us, 2 or 3 of those voices are speaking louder than the others. But all of us have 7 voices speaking. And you can decide which language to listen to or which language to call on in the different circumstances that you face every day. In the moment, which language do I need to speak? You could tell a dominant language to be quiet while you switch to a more helpful language for a specific situation. Your dominant language may not like that, but you can train those voices inside your head to work for your benefit rather than for undermining you. The worst thing anybody can do is to simply stay in their preferred primary language and expect everybody else to adapt. that cuts you off from 6 out of 7 of the communication styles. And it's a disastrous thing for us to do. It's the same as sadly, many Americans do when they go to a foreign country for a vacation. Because they're not understood, they just speak more loudly and more slowly, and that just increases the disconnect. And it makes us often disrespected in the nations that we visit. The contrast would be someone who takes the trouble to learn the local language and wants to blend in and not be seen as clearly American, or in my case, clearly English, when you're visiting somewhere that's not your native country. In the same way, if you understand all 7 languages and you grow your understanding of those 7, you can leverage each one in your own profile within yourself, internally, to work together for maximum effectiveness. And call on different voices from your profile for different settings and different needs. As you see that the person you want to connect with externally has a different preferred communication style to yours, choose to start in their preferred style so you establish a connection, and then build from there into other areas. So you might approach somebody by saying, hey, how are you feeling today? I know that you are having a hard time with this. That must feel really... It's established connection through emotion if they're emotively wired as their primary language. And then you can move on to, hey, while I'm with you, could we think about ... for a moment? Or could you give me your insight into this area? Or... I noticed that these things need to get done. Could we work together to do that? You're switching languages, but only after the initial connection has been made. In the same way, inside your head, you can tell your preferred languages to step aside for a moment so that one of your middle languages can step up and create a to-do list, or step up and think deeply about something. Or step up and be resourceful with the limited resources available to you. Or step up and have compassion for somebody who needs you to be compassionate, even though that's something you're not good at. We can call on every language in our profile, and that's another important voice to listen to. Don't just listen to the primary voice in your head. Don't just listen to the primary voices around you. And certainly don't listen to the one-way voices that are trying to tell you how to live your life and what you should think. Who we listen to really matters. Have fun this week figuring out who you're going to listen to next and why. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean a lot to me if you'd rate and review the podcast so it helps more listeners to find us. But also, would you give me your feedback on things you'd like to hear about in future episodes? And remember to share the episode with a friend if you see something that would benefit them as well. You can reach me with feedback through my website at markburlinson.com. Just click on the contact button and send me a message. I respond to everyone personally, and I really want to hear from you. So thank you again for listening, sharing, reviewing, and giving me your feedback.